After the Mediterranean, it's now getting worse, much worse, in the English Channel. A memorial held in the French port of Calais one day after the drowning of 27 migrants trying to cross those 34 kilometres of icy water to England will gauge reaction after the worst ever migrant disaster in the Straits between the continent and Britain. You'll hear grandstanding and finger-pointing between Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron. In reality, both sides cooperate more than they'll admit. Under an agreement signed all the way back in 2003, the British last year paid the French 67 million euros to keep asylum seekers from crossing. Both governments blame smugglers, which raises key questions. How do the migrants organize? Why the dramatic spike in attempted crossings in the past 3 months? More broadly, how to respect the fundamental human rights of those desperate enough to leave their home countries and risk their lives without opening the gates to uncontrolled and unmanaged migration. Today in the France 24 debate, we're wondering, was it an avoidable tragedy? Joining us from Calais, Afghan photojournalist and refugee Abdul Sabor. Thanks for being with us. From the nearby town of Marc, French Member of Parliament Pierre-Henri Dumont of the conservative Les Républicains party. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
From London, political commentator Connor Tomlinson joins us. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
An independent journalist, Raphael Kraft. He is the author of Passeur, which translates as smuggler, right?
Not really, I would say guide.
Guide is more like
somebody who, it's not as a criminal as a smuggler. A smuggler can also bring drugs and cigarettes.
Right.
Passeur it's softer. It's giving a pathway, giving a safe way to somebody from one point to another.
We'll talk about that in a moment. Just to tell our viewers, the France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, #F24debate. 27 victims. They include 7 women, 3 youths. There are 2 survivors, according to the French Interior Minister, suffering from severe hypothermia. Their condition, though, improving. They're identified as an Iraqi and a Somali national. And despite the tragedy, many say they're still willing to risk it. Shirley Sitbon has more.
The capsizing of the migrant boat in the English Channel is the deadliest tragedy there for years. But hours later, hundreds of migrants were set to make the same crossing in dinghy boats to reach the UK. Their journey has lasted many months, several years in some cases. This crossing, however dangerous, is seen as the final effort before they can start their new lives. But weather conditions are bad, so people come to this site near Calais to get aid, like food and blankets.
We crossed Libya and Algeria and then went to Spain by sea before I reached France. We're used to facing death in Syria and other Arab countries. We'll continue our quest despite the risks.
We're not afraid because we've faced far worse. It's 34 kilometres. Our journey until here was so much longer.
Abdel tried to cross the channel on Wednesday too, but was taken by rescue ships. Smugglers are known to organize crossings, demanding a minimum of 3,000 euros from each migrant. But Abdel denies he has used smugglers to cross the sea.
We look at our phones, and when the sea and winds are all right, when they're not too high, we try to leave on our own.
You mean without a smuggler?
No smuggler.
Who gets you the boat?
We do. There are 10 or 12 of us. We'll chip in and get one.
Where do you buy it?
We buy it everywhere.
They all say the UK is their final destination, with the idea that they would be able to find work there more easily. Some with the aim to send money to their families back home.
Abdul Sabor, just before I ask you about the mood today in where you are, just want you to react to something we heard in that report. You heard that one migrant saying, we don't use smugglers, we just we buy our own boat and are working amongst ourselves. What's been your experience? Abdul Sabor, can you hear us? Now we'll try to cross back to Calais there. Pierre-Henri Dumont, let me ask you, because we saw the images of this vigil that's took place this Thursday evening, and people have different points of view on what to do about the migrants, but all share the compassion for the lives that are lost. What's the feeling among your constituents?
Well, it's a drama. It's a drama we all feared that would have happened. And all the wonderful work made by the police forces, by the rescuemen at sea, by the firemen, was just to delay this drama. And clearly, I asked a question in the French Parliament 2 weeks ago, claiming that the government was losing control of the situation in Calais because I feared that drama would happen. And what I must say is that nowadays it's no long time for blaming the French, blaming the Brits. Not yet. We are still grieving our death, and we can have, any of us, a clear opinion on migration, yes or no, but we need to lean to the dead people and understand that no one deserves to die in the Channel, trying to find a better life for himself or for his family, fleeing from war, fleeing from starvation. And after the grieving moment, we will have the time to have a clear explanation between all of the governments who are involved in this drama in Calais, because there's dead people. There's 27 people who did not make it yesterday, did not stop migrants to take boats. Even yesterday night, we had people crossing the Channel. Today, we have people crossing the Channel. And they will go on and go on and go on. And if we are not taking hard solutions now, we will face other death in the Channel. And we need to do everything we can to stop and to save people's life.
Yeah, we'll talk about the possible solutions in a moment. Let's see if we can cross back to Abdul Sabur in Calais. Abdul, can you hear us?
Yes.
Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. We've seen since August this spike that's been happening. Why did it come to this?
I think because people who's living in camp, the condition is very difficult, like living condition. There is no food, no enough water. There is all the time evictions, and also camp. It's not safe place for the refugees, and as it is winter and it's very cold, and people trying more harder even than before and trying to live to their destiny. I think the more people try, the more it's getting dangerous, and the more people will be die.
But in that case, why don't the migrants or the asylum seekers go to shelters or file papers to apply for their asylum in France?
So I think the answer to this question, like why immigrants don't want us going to the shelter, because there is not enough shelter to the immigrant, and most of the immigrant who's living in Calais, their application been refused in other European country. With many people, when I speak, they speak perfectly German, Spanish, Italian. They've been in other European country. They've been refused, and they know it's very dangerous, and they know their friends been dying in the sea. And today, when I talk to people, I say, you don't scare, you still want to try to go? And I say, yeah, of course I still want to try to go, and this is not the place to live, and I'm not safe here, and I'm in dangerous here. And when we ask to one boy today, I say, okay, why you don't want to hear? And say, okay, well, like many people want to stay here, and say, why not to UK?
All right, well, let's take a look at the reaction. And the reactions come in two waves, you might say, over the last 24 hours. First, there was finger pointing, and it started Wednesday in London.
difficulties persuading some of our partners, particularly the French, to do things in a way that we think is the situation deserves. But what we want now is to do more together.
All right, that drew an immediate reaction from the French presidential palace with a statement. President Macron expects full cooperation from the British and that they, quote, do not instrumentalize a dramatic situation for political ends. On Thursday, the French president going further, listing all the law enforcement that's been deployed to the beaches along the coast of late, but they can't be everywhere, says Emmanuel Macron, despite the estimated 7,800 rescued since January.
When these men and women arrived on the shores of the Channel, it was already too late. So this morning, the Prime Minister held a meeting, and all the operational conclusions will be unveiled. We're obviously going to maintain this maximum presence. We'll continue to use drones, especially army drones. We will mobilize reservists and ask for additional mobilization from the British, because I remind you, when it comes to this, we are protecting the border for the British.
So, Conor Tomlinson, if you look at the situation a little closely, it sounds like there's a bit of grandstanding from both sides, right? Because the British, again, as I said at the outset, they pay money to the French to keep the migrants from coming over. The French, at the same time, who, with the British, take part in this cooperation agreement and who take umbrage to the strong language coming from Boris Johnson when there have been so many efforts made to try to stop people from crossing over.
I agree with both Boris that there's a necessity to tackle the problem, and also Macron in that there's a lot of political capital to be made by politicians on this side of the Channel bashing away at the issue. My concern is that there isn't much of a recognition in that there is also political capital for Macron to be made by him seeming more tough on immigration by breaking up the recent camp and driving lots of people out than Le Pen at the upcoming election soon. Boris's political capital, for example, there's a by-election, a local election in my constituency, and even though it's a conservative safe seat, one of the main issues on the docket when people are going on doorsteps is saying, hey, the Conservatives haven't gotten a hold of this Channel migrant crossing issue. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to disagree with a member of the French Parliament here. As much as the vigil is a very warranted sentiment because this is an utter tragedy, I think the best way to acknowledge that these people's lives were lost and respect their memory is as acknowledging there are about 1,200 people every day trying to make this journey. I believe about 46 this morning, including a bunch of children set off from the coast on a dinghy at 6 o'clock in the morning. So what we need to do is, one, not euphemize this as there aren't any smugglers, because they're trafficking in people. Two, recognize the failures in the institution on the UK side. For example, the former head of Border Force saying borders are just an inconvenience and having an absolute miscarriage of his duty to enforce these borders. And also the French police being very careful when breaking up these migrant camps on their side to ensure that when they do so, they have a pathway to return the migrants either back to countries which will have them, which are nearby their countries of origin, or their countries of origin if it is safe to do so, and these people are not asylum seekers and just trying to come over for a better life, but aren't actually fleeing persecution.
All right, before I turn to Raphaël Kraft, Pierre-Henri Dumont, do you agree? It feels like there isn't an actual plan, like we saw in Grande-Sainte a couple of weeks back, the breakup of a squatter camp of migrants, 1,200 people. Was there a plan to relocate them?
Well, we are still in the fear of having a new jungle here in Calais. The new jungle was something awful for both the people who lived there, the 10,000 people living there, and the people of Calais living around it. It was dramas after dramas and murders after murders. So we want to absolutely to avoid that. The fact is, we ask the migrants in Calais every day to go to what we call welcoming centers to examine the situations. In the middle of France, around Dijon, as an example, we often have buses to go there, but the migrants, they do not want to leave Calais because their dream is to go to the UK, not to go or to stay in France or to stay anywhere else in Europe. They want to go to the UK. So basically, we've got right now in France more than 2,000 empty places for migrants to rest and to focus on themselves, to know what they want to do. But these places are still empty because, well, the migrants, for some different reasons, don't want to go to these places and really want to stay in Calais. Not to stay in Calais, but to go to the UK, because when you are fleeing from home, crossing the world on 3,000 kilometers, you will not stop 30 kilometers away from achieving your dream. So we need to address the causes of why the migrants want to go to the UK and not only the consequences. And we are only talking about addressing the consequences and try to find solutions to the consequences. But that will not be a successful way to solve this problem if we are not addressing the real causes of why these migrants want to go to the UK and not stay in continental Europe.
Raphael Kraft, what are the real for you? What are the real causes of why the migrants want to continue on their journey?
Why they want to go to England for various reasons. I mean, there is an Afghan community that is more important in London than it is in France. It is changing now because you have many Afghans in Germany and in France. But often a migrant is seeking a diaspora, and there are diasporas in London that you cannot find in France. So that's one of the reasons why, one reason among others, that why they are trying to go to England. The Afghan photographer who is taking part in this debate was talking about these people who had been refused asylum in Germany, in Scandinavia, etc. You have tens of thousands of people who are wandering around in Europe today because they cannot be expelled to Afghanistan, to Sudan, because Europe is respecting the European Convention of Geneva, and they cannot send back people in a country where their life might be at risk. So, and they don't have a status because of the Dublin Agreement that forces a migrant to ask for asylum in the first country of entrance in Europe. And that is the consequence of this situation. In the meantime, when there was a jungle in Calais that has been dismantled in 2016, many people living in the jungle didn't want to go to England. They were just there because they had support in some ways, although they were living in very tough conditions. But what Mr. Dumont is saying, he's saying that it seems that France is very welcoming. It is not the case. Many people who should have a roof, because it is the law, because they are seeking asylum, spend their nights and days in the street.
But do you empathize with Pierrot Dumont in that he represents a constituency where local residents have been through a lot over the last two decades, have been generous over the last 2 decades, his constituents, and it's tough on them?
I think it's tough for people living in Briançon who are trying to fight
near the Italian border.
Yeah, the Italian border, who are, who see hundreds of people arriving every week, and the state doesn't want to lodge them, and it's minus 10 degrees, and you have thousands of people in France, in Calais, in Briançon, in Bayonne, who are trying to do what the state is not doing, and for them it is very tough. Of course, if you have 10,000 people living in these conditions in Calais, of course it's an inconvenience for the neighborhood, but it's nothing compared to what the people experience in the camp.
Conor Tomlinson, we heard the UK Home Secretary this Thursday suggest joint patrols of police on the French side of the Channel. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Well, my reaction was the same as when I heard her speech at the Conservative Party conference earlier this year, which I sat in on. She promised to cut the head off the snake of human traffickers. It appears the human trafficking snake is a hydra because every time she attempts to do something, 3 more heads spout up and bite her in the neck. It's pretty tragic that people are being caught in the crossfire of this when there are a reluctance to, as your previous guest said, address the draws that people want to come to the UK. I understand, of course, the valid point of there are Afghan expat communities here, same with Pakistan, which people are more drawn to living somewhere where their culture is going to be similar. That's why you don't get a lot of the French native homeless hopping on these boats, for example. But there's also the draws like free, at the point of use, NHS access, which a lot of people who have never paid into the system because they're first-year migrants or refugees and asylum seekers use disproportionately. But obviously, if you get a net hundreds of thousands of people every year with legal immigration, plus people seeking asylum, plus the 20,000 people we've taken in from Hong Kong because China is subsumed there and Britain was leading on that places a lot of burden on healthcare infrastructure, literally infrastructure, roads, travel, transport, etc. in London, which is in dire need of upgrading, even our sewage. So there are a lot of issues over here to do with the economic draws for migration, a lot of issues that aren't being addressed in terms of the housing shortage, the depletion of green spaces, etc., which aren't being addressed by the Home Secretary and the wider government. And that's a real failure, not of just the British people, but also the migrants who are, one, hoping to come to England for a better life, and two, stranded over in Calais and not between pillar to post, who the British people have a lot of sympathy for. That we have no shortage of compassion over here, but we do have a shortage of resources, and that must be acknowledged.
Abdul Sabor, do Afghans, for instance, want to go to the UK for free benefits? Is that why?
No, I think when I speak to many Afghans, they're waiting years and years and years to get the asylum. They're looking for the safety. The first things when I ask them what you want, and the first answer will be to this question: we want to get asylum and we want to be legal, because people still call them illegal. No human being should be illegal, and it's very shame to call someone illegal immigrant. Like, I think how we can make them legal. They leave the country, they cannot stay there and they cannot live here. And also because many people, and when there was big camps and it was 10,000 people living, because when they live in this camp, the situation was a bit better than now. Like when there is not big camp, there is eviction. Okay, what's changed to the people? There's still refugees who try to cross. Still people dying. They try to cross the sea. It's getting worse and worse to them. There's no better life when you leave home. There's no better life in UK than living in your country. You don't have your friends in UK, you don't have your family in UK, you don't have the documents, you don't have any of these things what you had before, but people has no choice. What's the better life to the immigrant when they're coming to UK? Because people, they just want to save their life.
Pierrot Dumont, let me ask you, because you again, we were talking about this proposal to have joint patrols. Is more police the answer?
No, it's clearly not an answer. No more police, no more money from the Brits. We tried that doesn't work. For some reason, again, we will not stop these people trying to cross and achieving their dreams. We can have as many police officers as we want. We cannot monitor 200 or 300 kilometers of shore. That's not possible. So basically, even if we've got 2,000, 3,000 police officers at the same time patrolling from Belgium to Normandy, this phenomenon won't stop. So again, we need to address the causes, not the consequences.
And you heard, and on that score, you heard Raphael Kraft mention how people have their asylum requests rejected. They're stateless. They can't be sent back. I know there's going to be on Sunday a meeting of interior ministers of countries that border the North Sea, including the UK. What do you want them to decide?
Let me say first that it's a question of sovereignty for countries. So sovereignty for France, not accepting British police officers patrolling with them on our coasts, and sovereignty also for our country to accept or not who can be in his country, who can become then a citizen, as an example, or who can be protected by France. That's a total sovereignty. So I totally disagree with the fact that no one is illegal. The fact is we've got illegal people here in Calais, and we need to address this fact. Then we need to focus on the fact that we try to welcome as much as we can these people. And if we take a look at Afghanistan as an example, if you take the numbers and the percentage of protection per asylum application, you'll see that France protects for Afghanis around 85% of the people from Afghanistan who are applying for asylum. So we are doing our job. the fact here is the UK is not processing asylum application. In 2019, the last year pre-COVID, so the last normal year, the UK processed 30,000 asylum applications, while France was processing 4 times more, 130,000 asylum applications at the same year. So basically, we have a country who is appealing migrants to come with a kind of easygoing legislation, especially on work, and oozing with the fact that it's easier for migrants to live in communities in the UK than to live in communities in France. And this country, the UK, is not processing asylum application and sends these migrants to apply for asylum in the hands of smugglers. Because to apply for asylum in the UK, you need to have both feet in the UK. You cannot apply for asylum in the UK while you're still in continental Europe. So it's totally crazy to see that, to understand that to apply for asylum in the UK, you need to cross the channel, to risk your life from a safe country to apply to another safe country.
All right, so disagreement there between Pierrot Dumont and Conor Tomlinson, but agreement on one issue, which is that the problem of smugglers needs to be addressed. People smugglers, as described on earlier by France's Interior Minister.
First and foremost, the people responsible for this despicable situation are the smugglers. And it's these smugglers that we must fight. More than 1,500 have been arrested since the 1st of January, and 4 smugglers, who we suspect may be directly linked to the passage of this makeshift boat, have been arrested. 2 of them are now being brought before the court.
Raphael Kraft, what has your research found when it comes? You were mentioning at the outset the distinction between those who guide you and those who are smugglers.
I am stunned that this kind of reaction by French Interior Minister can still be heard without being questioned. We know, researchers know, activists know, people observing migration since decades know that smuggling is a symptom and it's not a cause. And I may be provocative in saying that smugglers in the world that we are building now with higher walls, borders, etc., may save lives. A study by Harvard College made in 2017 was asking Syrian immigrants who took the Balkan routes, and they asked them, what did you find, how did you find the service given by the smugglers? 75% were satisfied. They were saying, the smugglers are our saviors. The smugglers are the ones who have enabled us to go from point A to point B, to flee, actually, the Syrian regime for that case. And this morning, ancient Greek professor and writer and activist Marie Connet reminded that 3 young Africans died in the Bidassoa, which is the river between France and Spain in the southwest of France. And she was saying, had they found a smuggler, would they have died? And she reminded what happened in the Pyrenees during the Second World War. 50,000 people managed to flee France, Jews, fighter pilots, bomber pilots, Girondists, Gaullists, to go to Spain. They needed smugglers. They needed professional smugglers. MI6, American Secret Service, Polish Secret Service. Who were they asking? They were asking for professionals. And yes, there was 1% of free smugglers, you know, people who were doing this for
a lot of people do get ripped off, and you also have cases of.
But you don't give news when the train arrives on time, and I can assure you that yes, there are. What happened yesterday in Calais, the scandal. What happens in the Mediterranean is a scandal. But you must not forget that a smuggler is the fruit of building walls. In Africa, Sahara was crossed for thousands of years, you know, and since Europe has decided to put borders, smuggling has developed. Car drivers have been criminalized. laws are being voted to criminalize people who drive people from point A from point B. In the past, we were calling them drivers. Today, they are smugglers. This is ridiculous. And what Mr. Darmanin is saying, there will always be smugglers. There will always be smugglers as long as there will be walls. This is, and who do the migrants fear often? Not all the time. I'm not saying that smugglers are angels. You have criminals, like everywhere. Ask the ones who are at the border between Bosnia and Croatia. Who do they fear? They don't fear the smugglers. They fear the Croatian border patrol, who beat them, who humiliate them, get rid of their clothes.
Conor Tomlinson, the erection a few years back of razor wire on the access to the port of Calais, the fact that it's become a lot harder for those to jump aboard, which was also perilous, by the way, to jump aboard freight lorries heading across the channel, that now they're getting in an even more dangerous situation with these inflatable boats. Is it because we're just trying to look at a sort of a militarized solution to all of this? When you see that next Sunday's meeting is going to be between mostly interior ministers, is that a recipe for failure?
Well, I'd quickly like to just say what was just said was true. That was very provocative, because you can't go and say, oh, there will always be smugglers, and I'm not trying to say smugglers are angelic, at the same time as saying, oh, well, that's essentially the equivalent of saying, oh, there will always be murderers, and also I'm going to poison the well by comparing France to Nazi Germany and saying these people are exactly the same as Jews being carried out from Nazi persecution. That's ridiculous. Also, the idea that no human being is illegal. Well, unfortunately, people do commit illegal acts. Borders are not illegitimate. They are the necessary structures around which you can inculcate a culture, that you can preserve an economy. We need borders to understand how to run sort of tests of different societies, and that's why people will shop around and go to different countries. Borders are actually a service to people who want to go somewhere and live a better life, because then you can choose the country which best befits your personality and your dreams has been the theme here. The idea that people trafficking is somehow virtuous, no, because as we've seen, it is risking lives, as the virtue of the people that have just died. And also, I don't understand why people are running defence for people. Okay, I'm going to be wording this very carefully. The idea that all migrants are excellent, no, because there are unfortunately people who will exploit the system of channel crossings, as we've seen in Britain with the recent Cenotaph taxi cab bomber, as we saw with the Manchester Arena bomber, as we saw with the Reading stabber. People will use this as a Trojan horse and package themselves in among people who are wanting to come to England and seek a better life.
Isn't that anecdotal evidence for your point, though? I mean, that's
not anecdotal evidence. It's saying the need. It says the need that you need to vet the immigration system. Come in legally, please. We will accept you. But that is the need.
The Manchester bomber was legally in Britain. He wasn't an illegal migrant. That's a.
I'm not saying it was illegal. It was the refugee acceptance system. On which point we also agree that the current processing system is pretty poorly done. Obviously, we have a smaller proportion than France's government because we're a slightly smaller country. But currently, we've got, I believe, 100,000, according to Migration Watch, 100,000 unprocessed applications, and 30,000 of those have been assessed as you have no more right to be in the country than someone else who have just applied for immigration, not for asylum. So clearly, there's a massive backlog, and it does both the British people and the people that are seeking better life here, both legally and illegally, a disservice.
Abdul Sabor, do you feel as though the conversation may change after what happened on Wednesday?
Or to change what, to the people or what?
The relationship between authorities and those who are trying to get across.
I think, as I said before, people has no choice and they will try to cross because there's no legal system to them. It's very shame, but as you see, like he said, people has to come legally. They want to come legally. Who try to go by boat? Who want to risk their life? Because I'm legal refugee. I have the documents and everything. I had contract to go to UK to photograph little Amal, and I applied to go legally, and I had the contract. They didn't give me the visa. Okay, he said people has to go the legal way, but its legal way exists to you, not to us, because of our color, because where we are from. And he said the border we need. You don't think the borders are racist? Yeah, of course it's racist. You can come where you want to go legally. You call yourself legally, but you still don't understand it's not legal. illegal to us, and there's no legal way. How they can go legal? They want to go legal. No one want to risk their life in going to the boat, going by sea, going by lorry, and they know it's dangerous. They die. They pay the money. And people, like, there will nothing change to the people. I talked to them today, and they say, we have to leave because we don't have a choice. This is not the place to stay, and how we can stay here. And also, everyone, they don't want to go to UK. Because if there was legal way, because also the association who's doing here the demonstration, in their request from the governments, they say, we want legal passage to the people, where you guys can create the system where they can legally apply to go to UK. But the system will not exist.
Migrants have been converging on Calais and its surroundings, as we've mentioned, for a long while. In fact, since the 1990s, back in 2002, when France's ambitious interior minister was preparing to run for president, Nicolas Sarkozy, that was his name, ordered the dismantling of the first jungle in Sangatte. Other squatter camps would then follow. We're seeing these images from December of 2002. So it's a long time ago. Pierre-Henri Dumont, do you feel personally as though you understand the problem better and that authorities understand the problem better today?
Well, we certainly know what we shouldn't do. We know that if we are beginning to create hard facilities in Calais or in the very proximity of Calais, we're going to have camps, we're going to have tents, we're going to have a new jungle with everything that goes with it. Easier smugglers' activities, prostitution, etc., etc. That's not acceptable for us. So we know we cannot have facilities for migrants in Calais or in a very close area to Calais. We know also that it seems the harder the crossings are, the less the number of migrants are in Calais. So we need to understand how to stop.
But let me just ask you on this, Pierre-Henri, you were saying earlier how borders are a matter of national sovereignty, but you heard earlier Raphael Kraft mention how, as a result, you still have these Dublin rules that first point of entry is where you must apply. Isn't it about getting other EU nations to share the burden, to all work together to solve the problem?
Well, listen, this is something we all know, okay? There is a Dublin Agreement. No one in Europe is happy with the Dublin Agreement. And clearly, France is not fulfilling the Dublin Agreement anymore because we had, I think, last year, 30,000 migrants who could have been sent back to the first European countries that entered, but we only sent back, I think, 3,000. So it's just 10%. So clearly no one is applying anymore the Dublin Agreement, but still there is a Dublin Agreement. That's a fact. And we are not talking about what we should do in the future. We are talking about what we should do now. And clearly we all need to understand that in Calais, if a migrant is in Calais, it's too late. It's too late because he will always find a way to cross. If it's not at the back of a truck, he will try to cross with the Channel Tunnel. If it's not in the Channel Tunnel, he will try to cross with small boats. And if it's not with small boats, he will try to find another way. So basically, we need to ensure, if we want to stop these people to die into the channel, we need to find both two solutions. First is to have safe passage between France and the UK for asylum seekers who were granted asylum by the UK. It means UK must give the opportunity for asylum applications to be filled in continental Europe. Then, if people are denied asylum by the UK, they need to be sent back home. Clearly. Or to apply for asylum in another European country. It means that yes, we will not fulfilling the criteria for Dublin, but we are not fulfilling Dublin anymore now.
All right. So in other words, the
jungle was dismantled. We decided, Bernard Cazeneuve, the French Minister for Interior decided not to apply a Dublin Agreement at that time.
All right, and it's a conversation we can continue. And the next step, of course, will be Sunday when those interior ministers meet in Calais. I want to thank you, Pierre-Henri Dumont, for joining us from the nearby town of Marc. I want to thank as well Abdul Sabor in Calais, Connor Tomlinson in London, Raphael Kraft. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.